There's a lot of Magic the Gathering players that aren't happy with the state of print in this game, whether that be with card quality, foils and Pringles, or just the text themselves going on the card. There was a very recent examples out of a Secret Lair that I think a lot of people just don't want to excuse whatsoever because it's absolutely wild. And it spawned the idea for this video where I think I want to go over some historical examples of misprints, how they've affected the game at large, where they, I guess, originate from and how much of a mistake it was, and then ultimately discuss the recent Secret Lair and get your opinions on it. Now, if you want more videos like this in the future, just talking about general Magic topics, let me know in the comment section down below, and let me know what you want me to discuss. Leave a like on the video, and of course subscribe for more. But let's hop right in the discussion. The first misprint that I want to talk about is more so around the coloring and the visual look of the card itself. It can be found from this article, Embracing Magic Art from 2023, where they talk about Serendib Efreet. Now, this article particularly goes over older misprints, which again are more common. This was more so in the starting days for Wizards of the Coast, cards that have historically been around, so printers were a lot more likely to make these type of mistakes. And Serendib Efreet is a good example of a card, blue 2 for a 3/4 flying, does 1 damage to you on your upkeep. Back when balance was a thing, right? Now this would be laughed at, but Serendib Efreet was then reprinted and revised as a green border, which again, it's still the same card at large, and it's still, again, in the artwork still provides an image of a genie and a Efreet, whatever it might be. But again, the green coloring of it is what's confusing, because obviously the card itself is a blue card, having blue in its mana cost, but green is probably the most confusing aspect of this. Now, this is more so a visual error. It's kind of like a fun misprint to have, but regardless, it's something that happened before in the printing era, but one that happened in that era of being older in Magic, one of the first couple of sets that happened. So something like this is relatively excusable. Another type of misprint that we can see in the game is one from this article by Riley Knight with Portuguese Stoic Rebuttal. Now, the card itself is really just a reduced counterspell. So if you have Metal Cracked with 3 or more artifacts, this is just straight up counterspell. You counter target spell. It's not a cancel, it becomes a counterspell. We see many variants of cards like this. This is fine, it's a common, and in English it says counter target spell. But if you look at the Portuguese version, you'll notice in the text that there's no counter target spell. This card is just an instant speed spell that does nothing. And I shouldn't say does nothing. Before someone in the comment hits me with the fact that you can cast this to increase your storm count, I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it. Do not comment that in my comment section. This card does absolutely nothing. Now, this is more of an egregious example and does have a larger effect for Portuguese Magic players or players that are playing in this language or only have access to this card. This card does not do anything and can be confusing for a lot of players. So you would have to look up the English version of it because it just doesn't do anything whatsoever. It doesn't have that counter target spell line. So this is still a larger affected card, but one in a smaller printing and one that affects a smaller region, which isn't necessarily the biggest, I guess, explanation for this, but at least at large, the card is corrected. And again, the English version, the universally accepted version, or I should say the universally printed at large version, not accepted, does have that effect. So it's fine. You can oracle it and it's still going to be okay. The last example that I want to go over of a historical reprint is one where, look at these Reddit edgelords over here. Has WotC ever explained how Hostage Taker was released with such an obvious mistake? Let's look at the card itself. Firstly, this is the original printing of Hostage Taker, and you kind of need to read it to get it. And let's see if you catch it. When Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. Now, the trick here is in that first line. When it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. Now, you'll notice that you can target yourself, and then it's until it leaves the battlefield. So you target Hostage Taker, it goes, but then it stays exiled until it leaves the battlefield, so it just re-enters. And then you just exile it again. So essentially, you have to target an artifact or creature. If this is the only artifact or creature that you have, or maybe is even on the battlefield, you pretty much just have to loop this infinitely, and it causes a draw. That is the ruling around this card. So it actually got Errata to then have this version where it says when Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. So you can't self-target the Hostage Taker. This had more gameplay implications. This was just another thing to catch. And then, you know what? I'm more willing to let this go as well, similar to the other examples, because there's a lot of text that can be forgotten. There's a lot of cards being designed. I do, however, have some problems with this just because it was a rare in a design set. There has to be a lot of quality control out there. Other cards have this type of templating on it. You can just copy and paste in a lot of ways. So having another worded on this is very important, just so you don't go through those infinite loops and have those gameplay implications. Folks caught this relatively immediately. It was printed, but then an errata was made. And again, big mistake. This was probably the biggest mistake out of more recent misprints that have happened. And obviously these aren't examples of misprints where cards have been miscut or the color's been slightly off. It's like Serendib Efreet, whereas the color was definitely just off. That wasn't a coloring error. All copies of that reprint are that color. Hostage Taker here is definitely, again, showing you the increasing nature of some of these misprints. But the more recent one that has got people riled up is around the Secret Lair Deceptive Divinations drop print error. Wizards of the Coast released an article on February 5th, 2024 that says the version of the card Circular Logic found in Deceptive Divination drop, part of the Secret Lair Winter Super drop, was inadvertently printed as a sorcery. The error is found in both foil and non-foil versions. However, we assure you that you can still cast it as an instant and the Oracle text rules remain accurate. And so it seems like based on this announcement that you're still going to get the misprinted version of this card, but you can still cast it as an instant. I mean, this is the original Circular Logic, right? So blue and 2 for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard, and it has a lot of synergy with the fact that it has madness, so it's like a 1-mana counter spell, but obviously it's going to counter and force you to kind of have that spell pierce ability or mana leak ability equal to the amount of cards in your graveyard. The printing in question that is a problem is this version right here. First of all, the templating is absolutely insane, but ultimately speaking, these cards are wild, but I am of the stance that because I can get the original printing of this card with relative ease, I'm fine with this. I don't need to deal with this whatsoever, but the misprint is what my problem is, because this can happen with future Magic cards as well. You'll notice it says Sorcery. It says Circular, Art, Logic, and then it has like 2 Sorcery blue. Templating, absolutely insane, but the Sorcery is key here, because what Sorcery, like, unless you have Teferi Time Raveler out, you know, with its possibility, how are you countering anything with this sorcery? So they've said, again, it's going to be errata, or sorry, you can go with the original rules text. You don't have to listen to it, whatever. And before people get into a tussle, by the way, about whether or not this card is playable, first of all, yes, it is. It's a staple counterspell in Pauper combo right now. So you play Tireless Tribe as your primary combo piece. You discard your whole hand. You flip the power and toughness so that your Tireless Tribe has like some crazy high power value. And then because you can discard cards like Circular Logic as a counterspell, you cast it for its madness cost and counter your opponent's stuff. The card is actually really playable. Definitely a niche archetype, and specifically for Pauper. But the card is playable, so it matters, okay? But I think one thing I will say is a card now has this kind of cult following, right? And because it's a misprint of such large stature and actually is played in that specific Pauper deck, in whatever EDH deck or other kind of fun casual deck that you have, I think this actually might go for a crazy premium. Not only, of course, because it is a Secret Lair and it is a single printing, but I think it now will demand that extra level because it is a sorcery. People will purposefully use it to confuse people, which I think is part of the negative connotation with this. I think a lot of spells out there that are like counter target instant spell, or look for a specific type of card, or discard a specific type of card will be confused when it's used against a card like this. And I think it's important to maybe reprint this card or this version of this card properly. It may not happen because, again, this is part of a Secret Lair drop. This is how it was templated. But my big question is, what are the Wizards of the Coast process workflows that led to this? There has to be so much design and I guess testing that something this big, it's the type line of the spell, it's not even a spelling mistake, it's the type line of the original spell that got change. It probably had to go through so much rigor, just double checking whatsoever. It has to go through multiple levels of testing to get through, which is what Saffron Olive brought up here. And Robert Taylor originally tweeted out just noting the fact that yes, this was a mock-up error, but what does the workflow look like that absolutely changes this? And this is what I was kind of talking about, where Draft Sim later in this tweet talks about purposeful misprint to increase collectability. I mean, yeah, what if Wizard starts doing this on purpose, like Secret Lair misprint? Like, I'm predicting this right now. Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think there's going to be a Secret Lair misprint where they reprint all the cards that they've ever misprinted, like accidentally, like the cards on this list, but like in their original art? Like, we're gonna get this Secret Lair, we're gonna get Hostage Taker, we're gonna get green Serendib Efreet, we're gonna get Portuguese, you know, cancel, but like all this stuff. I think this is absolutely insane. I don't think this should be happening. I think Wizards R&D needs to really tighten up on what's going on here and their templating and everything. But I think it's kind of hilarious, and I think Secret Lair misprint is definitely a possibility. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on misprint. Maybe let me know, what is your favorite misprint out there? Love to hear that down below. I love getting these little collection of unique cards out there. I'd love to add that to my little knowledge pool of Magic cards. But for now, we're gonna sign off from there. Until next time, or next misprint.